Summary of Chapter 2, My Early Life. David Clarke's early years were shaped by his family, environment, and childhood experiences, which influenced his future path. This chapter provides a vivid account of his upbringing and formative influences. Born on February 16, 1949, in Oldham, Lancashire, David was the son of Thomas George Clarke and Elsie Dyson Clarke. He grew up with his older brother, Michael. At age 5, his family moved from Oldham in northern England to Garston, Watford, in the south, marking a significant transition. His father served in the army, while his mother, a member of the Royal Air Force, was a strong supporter of the royal family. In Oldham, David attended Sunday school at Christ Church but did not fully understand its teachings. He began his education at Clarke's Field Infant School, where he showed curiosity and a mischievous streak. Though exposed to religious teachings, he was puzzled by the Easter story, only understanding its meaning later. David's grandfather was an important figure in his early life, influencing his views on work and commitment as a skilled craftsman and trade union member. Childhood memories of interactions with neighbors, visits to the local park, and trips to the swimming baths remain significant to him. The move to Garston brought challenges, including ridicule for his northern accent. He attended Garston Infant School, where his mischievous nature persisted. One notable incident involved a hamster and misplaced plimsolls, adding to his reputation for trouble. Academically, he struggled to focus, often seeking attention through disruptive behavior. Despite his challenges, David's mother encouraged his creativity, particularly through playing the piano. While this provided an outlet for self-expression, his rebellious tendencies remained. This chapter sets the foundation for understanding David Clarke's early development, highlighting the influence of family, environment, and early spiritual exposure. It also foreshadows the rebellious and troubled path he would later take, leading to the transformation explored in later chapters. Now read Chapter 2 narrated by David.
My early life. I was born on the 16th of February 1949 at 9:50 a.m. in Boundary Park General Hospital, Oldham, Lancashire. My mother's name was Elsie Dyson Clarke, who was married to my father, Thomas George Clarke, some time after the war. She informed me that this hospital was next to Oldham Athletic Football Ground. We lived with my mother's father in his house, 26 Fleet Street, Clarksfield, Oldham. My grandfather's name was Watts Ormrod, and he was a retired craftsman and senior member of a trades union. His hair was white, which I'm told happened due to an accident at work when a large rivet was pushed through his hand. I had a brother who was 2.5 years older than me, Michael John, spelt Michael instead of Michael, due to my mother's stubbornness when he was named at the registrar's office. The official informed her that the way she had spelt Michael was in fact wrong, and my mum reacted at being corrected and insisted it would be spelt just as she had written it. My mum and dad were both in the armed forces and were very proud to be British. Dad was in the army and mum was in the Royal Air Force. I was christened at Christ Church, Glodwick, and my godfather was David Maltby of 382 Barton Road, Stratford, and he was a sidesman at the church on Barton Road. He gave me at that time a Bible with a text of scripture written inside its cover, Proverbs 3:16, which reads, "In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths." I found a baptism certificate dated on the 3rd of April 1949, where it states I became a member of Christ, the child of God, and an inheritor of the kingdom of heaven. This, however, is wrong, as I did not become a member of Christ until I was born again on the 16th of January 1970, which I speak of later. I remember attending a church and a Sunday school at Christ Church, which was just along the road from our house in Fleet Street. On one occasion I was so cosy, sitting in the pew, I fell asleep and wake up with a jolt, wondering where I was, just as the vicar had finished his sermon. I had been lulled into sleep by that stimulating, or should I say soporific sermon. I haven't changed even to this day. Must have been about 3 or 4 years old. It was my mother's idea to take my brother and I to the Sunday school. At Sunday school, I remember we painted pictures of houses, and still remember wondering why did the teacher draw a house with the door in the middle of the building and windows either side of the door. This was because I knew that we lived in a house in a terrace, and our door was on one side of the window, just like the other houses in that street. I had no spiritual impressions of the Lord Jesus Christ from those times. Just across the street from our house, there was a great Roman Catholic church building and living accommodation, surrounded by a high wall. It was built of red engineering bricks and several stories high, with stained glass windows along the long church building. I remember looking up at the crooked lightning conductor, and I still get the feeling of austerity and awkwardness when wondering what was behind that wall. It produced the same feeling in me when I heard the story of Toby Twirl read to me. In that story, he meets a giant who lived behind a great high wall castle. I was afraid to go near or even think of climbing the wall or trespass in the grounds. I did not know it was a Roman Catholic church building until about 25 years later, when my mother informed me. At that time, I knew of no other religion than that of the Church of England. I assumed my mother was right in all these matters, and so the Catholics were wrong. I remember the street lamps because a man used to come along each night to light them, as they were gas lamps. He had a small ladder which he carried with him with a point at one end, and he climbed the ladder and lit the lamp each night. I assumed they were gas lamps. I remember my favourite sweet, which was what we called kali. It's called sherbet now. We could also buy a very small loaf of bread called a penny loaf. At that time, when I was about 4 years old, I wanted to go to another Sunday school. I did not know at that time it was at a church building which was on Lees Road. My mother must have taken me there before. On this occasion it was Saturday morning, and I did not believe that there was no Sunday school that day. After being dressed, I think my mother must have humoured me and did not take me seriously. I said I was going to Sunday school. I left home. I don't think my mum realised, and I walked at least 2 miles along Balfour Street and along the busy Lees Road, and found the building. To my disappointment, it was all locked up. On my return, I wandered off and got lost, and ended up by asking for help from a laundry shop. They put me in the window as a lost boy and called the police. I was soon returned home. I think my mum was horrified how far I'd been. I commenced my school days at Clarksfield Infant School. My brother Michael John had already attended there and must have been in the 3rd year when I started. I remember my first day at school in the classroom with the other children. The ceilings were high, and there were things like sandpits and blackboards and easels and old-fashioned classroom desks and tables. The girl next door, Vivian Butler, began school with me, and I can remember her crying for her mum. And I remember not feeling the need to cry, and I tried to comfort her and assure her that all would be well. My Auntie Edith was very good to us boys. We would visit her every Saturday. She lived with my granddad's sister. She was called Aunt Alice. Aunt Edith would take us out to the great park in Oldham, and on the way home we would call in at the chip shop. In those days, chips were real chips, cooked with real lard. One of my favourite meals she would cook was also called potato pie with red cabbage. In the house there was a cellar, which I always liked to visit. I think at one time washing was done in the cellar. At that time, my brother was probably the only one close to me I had, although we were not too close. He was just there. We used to go swimming on a Saturday morning to Wardhead baths. This type of swimming bath was typical of the old-fashioned baths of that time. They were small and water green, and walls tiled cream. At the side of the pool there were what they call slipper baths, where you could sit in with up to your chin with hot water, and carbolic soap was supplied to wash. It was very cosy. In fact, the whole atmosphere was warm and cosy, not like the cold clinical swimming baths of modern times. Next door was the wash house, where my mum used to go at the same time to do washing. One Saturday morning I nearly drowned and was saved by the attendant called Norman. I had tiptoed backwards, and as the pool got slowly deeper and deeper, I found I could not touch the bottom. It was through the providence of God that the attendant, Norman, turned to see me reaching for air upwards out of the water. I couldn't speak. He dived in to rescue me, and I can still feel the fear to this day of nearly drowning. Across the road from the swimming bath was the slaughterhouse, next door to the inhabited houses. We were very curious and would look through the slatted windows and see the men kill the pigs and sheep and cattle. This was awesome and ghoulish and a fearful thing, but we were very curious and we wanted to see how the men slew the animals. There was blood, animal intestines, animals' heads, bones and blood. The smell was awful and not pleasant at all, and it seemed as though the pigs knew they were going to be slaughtered and their end had come. I've wondered about my brother since then, as he was 2.5 years older than me, and how this may have affected him later in life, as he demonstrated a callous way which was characteristic of killing without mercy, just like these slaughtermen. About this time, I remember coming home from school, and in the dusk of the day, and the house seemed unusually quiet, I noticed some blood on my brother's book, and my mother told me there had been an accident. My brother had fallen down a basement stairway shaft at school and landed on his back. He was concussed, and I remember then feeling how precious life was. My brother could have died through that fall. It was awesome. I still had no recollections of God during this time. Oldham is a small town in the north of England, not far from the city of Manchester, and during the 19th century was an industrial community famous for its cotton mills. In fact, my grandfather was a great supporter of the trades union. As a child, I remember the old mills, the red brick built with huge chimneys towering high towards the buildings. Also the water reservoirs, which we were always warned to stay away from. My mum had spoken about children being drowned in them, and this was sufficient for me to obey her.